Here is a potential fire hazard at the dryer where we have this 240 volt plug, and then it starts to pull out and you have really fine dust that can be ignited. So this is a good place to clean out probably once a year, if not twice. Not picking up any odors in the home, however there is a real fine dust. Doesn't even have a high fiber content in it from the carpet. The carpet seems to be well vacuumed and well maintained, but there is a fine dust that would be irritating to the mucous membrane. Here we have a closed foundation vent crawl space in which we have a 6mm plastic covering the ground almost 100%, with the exception that the plastic is not sealed, so whatever moisture forms or collects underneath the plastic just allows bacteria to grow. This creates an environment for insects. Here's some cockroach, little baby cockroach, snail tracks, slug tracks. This excessive moisture trapped underneath the plastic then increases the relative humidity in the crawl space, and we get a little bit of mold growth up on the wood. Here we have more signs of water infiltration, some pools of water still, areas where there are patterns where the water has dried and come in. There are slug tracks on the wall and some minor mold growth up on the joists. More extensively, there is mold growth on the air ducts, and also the rusting of the insulation rods indicates that at some time there was condensation forming on these ducts, creating the rust and the mold growth. As we travel further into the crawl space, we see more mold growth on the air ducts, as well as heavier on the joists, also the bathroom exhaust duct. This indicates that we're getting more moisture back in here. You can see the insulation's coming down. That's typically a sign of moisture. Also wiring with some mold growth on it, but this is extensive on the air ducts. Here's an area where we have an air duct running up into a chase that's not sealed. We have a lot of mold growth on the wood, so this allows a direct pathway on into this chase. I'm not seeing any mold up in there, but I don't have a great view of it. But yet there's a lot of mold on the wood and on the wiring in here. Here's a steam humidifier that's on the main trunk. These are notorious for needing a lot of maintenance so that they don't clog and become a dripper instead of a sprayer. Again, we have moisture here on the ground. The air ducts are condensating at some time because there is extensive mold growth on them. It's also on the plumbing pipes. We could see it up on the joists. The air ducts were installed without a barrier on the ground, so they were dragged through the mud. So a lot of cleanup to do on these ducts, both for the mold and the mud. More slug tracks. I'm assuming these were all before they sealed the crawl space. One reason why we no longer like the plastic is because it allows condensation to form underneath. I don't know if you can see the water droplets. Also, the opening in the soil are pathways for radon. So we essentially have a microclimate underneath this plastic. And since it's not sealed, whatever you have underneath the plastic, like all these insects, is going to affect the crawl space and then eventually the home. because the plumbing and the electrical penetrations are not sealed that go into the home. So here's your bathroom, and here is the subfloor with extensive mold growth on it. The moisture barrier has been installed well as far as it running right to the wall, but we're below grade and we're getting effervescence caused by water wicking through. So really this barrier needs to go up at least one more block, preferably two. I've disconnected a supply duct from this main trunk, and looking in here, we're seeing that there is a fair amount of debris and suspect mold growth on the walls. This rust, I'm afraid, is coming from the humidifier. Because the other duct was so bad, I disconnected this main trunk, and in here I'm finding water as well as extensive mold growth inside this main duct. A lot of rust on the damper, so much so that it's rusted right through on the bottom. And then inside the distribution box, there's also extensive mold growth. So to summarize, we opened up this distribution box, which has extensive mold growth in it, as well as contamination into the air ducts coming off of it. There is mold growth on the wiring and on the subfloor, not extensive but thorough. There's a nice moisture barrier on the ground, however it's not sealed, so the moisture that's being formed underneath is able to come into the crawl space air. There is no drying mechanism for this closed crawl space, so it's just kind of a cave. This plastic might be reused, even though it would be better to install an insulation blanket on the ground. Here we're at the master bedroom bath, and it has been leaking. Looks like it still is leaking. Mold growth on the wood. This is on the discharge side. Yeah, that's actually still wet. Best practice is to have the boots sealed to the floor so air from the crawl space does not enter the living area. This is the same for the second floor. Here we want to seal the boots so attic pollutants don't come into the living area. I took a picture down inside the air ducts, and you can see a fine layer of debris. A lot of rust is in the system, indicating there's moisture issues, and the material adhered to the ducts is fungal growth on the side. This door is not elevated enough so that water is entering the crawl space, and since they have multi layers of plastic, the moisture is trapped underneath it and then forms a bacterial bed, and that gives the crawl space a foul odor. And since the barrier is not sealed, the moisture that forms underneath the barrier increases the relative humidity in the crawl space and allows mold to grow on virtually all of the surfaces. I understand the air ducts were replaced just a year ago, so they must be condensating heavily during the summer. Here is the air handler, and there's a condensation pipe that comes off the air handler, and it is apparently clogged, so moisture may be backing up in the system. Also, this humidifier may be a moisture issue, so that in the ducts that are directly downstream of the air handler and the humidifier, I opened up and I'm finding mold growth inside the flex duct, extensive rusting on the dampers, mold growth on the duct liner within the system. So this is acting as a reservoir and growing mold and then sending its pollutants throughout the ductwork and the living area.
These ducts cannot be cleaned, they need to be replaced. There are a couple of spots where there's leaking on the discharge pipes. I think the kitchen and the master bathroom, producing moisture on the barrier as well as maybe from condensation. So thank you for the opportunity to be of service.